So let's say we agree, and we have some people listening who would also be interested in the idea that there is definite opportunity to develop the capability for life cycle or value management.
Yes.
Clearly, customer service by itself can't do that.
Yes.
It requires the associated and specialist skills of sales and marketing and any other parts of the organization that contribute to that. It seems to make sense from the perspective of CX, getting rid of or encouraging that seamless experience. I'm sure there are cost benefits in terms of the consolidation of those enterprises and those different functional areas. So let's go down a route of saying, if you're interested in that, what would you actually need? And let's keep this pretty simple in terms of just the core enablement for that to happen. For example, I think one of the key ideas, obviously, is as we develop a relationship, we need to be able to see that relationship develop. That's a very simple idea. At the moment, that's not so simple because often that data about our relationship with that customer is still spread across a whole number of different technology stacks, again, traditionally in those functional areas. So for us to be able to easily see that, all people easily see that, we would need to have that data flowing freely. So not getting into the detail of how we do that, one of the major enablers of that is to be able to see the customer relationship and their behaviors very clearly for all concerned. And that will be a major enabler. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because see, it's about the data that's flowing in. And then the most important thing is how it, let's not go into the details, like you said, about how the data can flow in and etc. But, the one thing that probably is going to be really, really crucial there is to, leverage insights and analytics to drive specific CVM programs around that, right? All your customers, probably if you have like hundreds, set of customers, not all of them are ready to, probably purchase another product, or not ready for an upsell or cross sell, right? Or even if they are ready for a different product set, right? So that's where, you basically leverage analytics to classify these customers, build segments out of them, and then have that entire mindset as an organization to move away from not just delivering, sales from a sales standpoint, but unifying the front office marketing, sales, and customer service functions. That's one part of it. And the second part of it is by leveraging digital customer service and self-service channels, you basically free up the service bandwidth of your agents. And then essentially, I just mentioned, right, essentially moving them to become their own, become your, sales channel or a sales engine. So that's the transformation there. And then the most important thing, the enabler for all of this is going to be something, like I said, which is the analytics engine that is actually, delivering upon and identifying from the parsing through all the customer conversations, identifying those specific conversations and those specific customers who are ready for those kind of engagements. So
Right.
that's
So what we're saying there is we need to be able to see what the customer is over time, but
yes,
also we need to have the prompts that tell us right
correct.
time, right place to make
Yes,
those engagement points.
absolutely.
Otherwise, we're going to be interfering, and also not only interfering, we're going to be wasting our energy and our time as well. So that's
100.
where, again, at a simple level, let's just call it automation and AI contribute to being
Yes,
able to see the patterns in that data to the extent of being able to feed back to us
yes,
correct timing and make the associated suggestions of how we should be doing it. Plus, by the way, what you just said is if we're going to be segmenting our customers, presumably that introduces the notion of personalization as well, at least at segment level, if not down to individual level. So again, we need to be able to bring that data together and have suggestions as to how we treat people and whether or not, ideally, in contact strategy terms, it's live, it's self-service, or indeed we anticipate it proactively.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. Yes.
Okay.
And
What do we need to do on workflow? Because again, I'm, going back to the quote that you mentioned about the Gartner thing, where 88% of people are beginning on self-service, but only 13% are ending up in
yeah,
that channel,
right.
with the associated point that, by the way, they've had to go back to live to make the final outcome work for them. I personally think that we've got a lot of work to do on making our journeys better.
100%. Yeah, you nailed the right problem right there, Martin, because they're not as effective as they are at this point in time, right? From a whole, so what's basically lacking? So, for example, if I've purchased a product, or I need some information about it. The first place that I go and check out about something on that issue is Google, right? So I Google about it to find if the issue is sorted there. And that's where, the most important thing is your knowledge base article needs to come up. Your help center articles need to come up. And that's what you need to be doing as a brand. And that's where your journey gets started. And you top it off, and to close out the self-serve journey, you need to think about how can you blend in guided workflows, not just within the knowledge base articles, but also within integrate them at every touch point, like your chatbots across all your social channels, across all the digital channels, your live chat channels, and basically scale it across all the devices, like even if it's a mobile app, or or a desktop website, or everywhere, right? So that scaling up needs to happen. And most importantly, it needs to be very consistent across all the information that you have on your knowledge base article should be ideally similar, and it should not be broken in terms of the information, and it should not be different as well from what you're communicating at your chatbot with a guided workflow. So
So,
these are, sorry.
no, please. So just to finish that thought process, excuse me for
Yes.
interrupting there.
No, no.
We're saying there has to be a common approach to customer data. There has to be
Exactly.
a common approach to knowledge, which is then available to any interface and any modality of communication and any form of workflow which contains those journeys.
That's a brilliant way to summarize that. Yes, Martin, you got it right.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. So that's an ambition. The means to build that is probably subject to another discussion that you and I can have. But that's got to be a vision that we have to enable that to take place.
Yes.
And the other bit, just to tie that back in again, is moving from a reactive model to a proactive one, is really saying humans can't be expected to find all of that in real time because the
Exactly.
moment will have passed. Increasingly, we are reliant upon the intervention that algorithms give, because they're capable of spotting patterns, and combined then with right levels of automation, capable of either auto-suggesting relevant things for us, and that's, I think, manifest in language like agent desktop these days, where we're having, again, agents supported by the relevant information, knowledge, workflow, policy, whatever you want. And actually, if you transpose that into a customer context, they would experience that as, again, being served with relevant data, relevant knowledge, relevant workflow, if they were doing that through an interface of an avatar, or some form of natural language interface. And
And this
so as a vision, we're trying to actually serve both stakeholders, customer and advisor, in an identical way. And
yeah,
if we go back to the big picture of what we're talking about, that would happen across the stages of awareness,
acquisition,
purchase, embedding,
engagement, and
growth,
loyalty, and
and
yeah, your
advocacy.
vocal champion, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's kind of the big picture that we're really talking about there. And we started this conversation by saying that the journey component of that has to be hugely simplified. Otherwise, we find the Gartner behavior pattern, like a sort of Groundhog Day repeating itself. We will start in new channels, but we'll end up in traditional ones, high effort, nobody will win.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that the journeys themselves are sufficiently simple that customers don't need help.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very good way of thinking about it, because if we don't do that, we will never make progress on enabling customers to really benefit from a 24/7 availability in certain journeys. So,
No, absolutely.
so that's our vision that we're
That
talking about.
that's absolutely the right way to put it, right, Martin. And I really like the nuance that you brought in about the context switching from when the customer switches channels, right? And
Yeah,
that's where your technology within your contact centers and the other parts of the organization should be very much strongly unified or strongly connected,
yeah,
interconnected. So
yeah,
for example, you have a chatbot, and then a customer starts a journey with the chatbot, and then he when he's speaking to when he's speaking to the agent on the same channel, on a different channel, right? The agent needs to have the complete context of that customer, not ensuring that he's not repeating himself. And that basically that journey of uh, you know maximum. So here is the way I put it, right? You basically ensure your customers are you're very proactive in terms of reaching out to customers and ensuring their problems are resolved at the first place. But if a customer wants to reach out to you, enable them with self-serve, okay? And then for most complex issues, only then the customers reaching out to the agents is the ideal scenario. And then you empower your agents with something like a unified agent desktop and AI powered, and I would rather take it to the next step here, with generative AI capabilities,
yes.
right? Empowering agents at that level, with respect to their smart recommendations, their nudges, and their whole workflows of post calls, pre-calls, and during the calls is going to be really crucial.
So
Absolutely.
I think if you summarize that as a contact strategy, use insight, by the way, to get rid of the failure, the stuff that we don't want, the customer doesn't want, just eliminate that stuff.
Absolutely.
The next
Yeah.
stage is then to anticipate and get there before the customer knows they've got a need almost. That's
Right.
fantastically good. And again,
Yeah.
that's leveraging insight and proactively engaging with customers in a way that really is effective. If then we've got reaction taking place, and I think we will always have some reaction, the goal has to be we get it right first time.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
again, interesting piece of research, which I've been quoting quite a lot recently, which is a bit depressing, I have to say, is if you ask customers that question of the numbers of times that they actually get to the goal first time, they are globally saying it's about 46%, no more than that. Now, that's
Mm.
interesting because if you ask most contact centers, they will tell you it's about 70%. That's the myth that we have about first contact resolution. If you ask the
Yes.
customers, it's about half that. Yeah. So,
Absolutely. And
so
that's
now that is a heck
the
of a
parity.
statistic. If you combine that with the other one we talked about, you start in self, but only 13% actually end up completing in self-service. It just shows us the journey we've all still yet to go on to make this stuff effective, for both ourselves and also from the customer's perspective. Hence, getting back to this point that we need to have a way of being much, much clearer about the journeys and recommending to customers which route they should take to that outcome. And again,
Yeah.
just as a little bit of as a small diversion, I think we've got to a point in the market where omni-channel, in terms of just switching it on and letting customers discover how they get through that maze, is clearly inefficient, frustrating, and nobody is winning. And I think we're moving to a point of allowing customers to start where they wish to, but very rapidly recommending and saying, if you want to talk to us about this, we would recommend the following service designed experience for you, which is probably specific to a channel, specific to a workflow, specific to either self-serve or escalation. and one that, by the way, every single day we rehearse, we test, we make sure it still works, and we can therefore guarantee that the customer will be able to get to that outcome, and therefore reducing the cognitive effort around of flip-flopping between different channels. And I think that's another massive part of the work that we've got to take responsibility for, which is when we design stuff, also let customers know, because we are the experts in our own organization, the best way to get that outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I really love that concept of, you mentioning, the whole journey, and customers actually, trying to reach out at all these different channels. And then the brand, actually, from a brand standpoint, brand essentially trying to, being present at all these channels and delivering the same level of experience, right? So that's the unification of that experience needs to, kind of come out and be in like, very robust place. So it's a great point. What do you think about the technology enablement within this? Because this is not like a singular program that one particular function should specifically own. But then how do you think about, as a brand, as a large enterprise, how do you think technology will play a part in,
Yeah.
bringing something like this to life?
Well, I think it's a good question. And I think that, again, we are still evolving to that point where it's easy to know what to invest in. And indeed, I think from the vendor's perspective, they're still getting their heads around this. We have separate stacks still for sales. We have separate stacks for marketing, separate stacks for service when we buy cloud-based solutions. Interesting, I just saw something yesterday that said people are starting to count up the cost, by the way, of cloud services, and they're beginning to go, oh, that's more expensive than I thought. So I think, again, there's going to be a demand for a more efficient investment into that.
Yeah.
So conceptually, strategically, if you're going to talk about what should we be doing, I think there's a very strong case, just to sort of start to summarize some of this stuff, that value management, lifecycle management is definitely a North Star, right? Definitely something
Yes.
we should be thinking
Yes.
and planning and bringing to bear. It involves departments collaborating, and part of that facilitation is then having a common approach to data, to knowledge, to policies, to workflow, and to communication channels, and that those should become increasingly shared amongst all of those representative functional areas that engage across the life cycle. Now,
Yeah, it's a fair call out. Yeah,
what
absolutely.
then? What the practicalities of all of that is that we still have got embedded functionally orientated budgets and purchasing processes. Yeah. So I think that probably in reality, for the next period of time, most people will continue to improve their their MarTech stack, their sales stack, their service stack and stuff like that. However, they should be thinking about it from the point of view of, how do I move from that investment to one where increasingly I can have visibility across, yes, the whole life cycle. The other thing to be said is that there's probably different approaches. I know that a lot of people are investing in different forms of data right now. The language of customer data platforms, although it's more marketing specific, represents the acknowledgement that we need to consolidate different data sources to have more of a 360-degree view. Some organizations might take the view that therefore they will have that as their next generation approach to CRM. Now, again, you will know better than I do the detail of that, whether or not actually the basic functionality and data model in a customer data platform is fit for the traditional duties of CRM or not. But whatever needs to be done there, the major point from the vendors is there needs to be a common approach to that,
Exactly.
that would allow a sales and a marketing and a service community to not only have a basic foundation level, but also specialize in the way that each of those departments need to specialize, given what they're responsible for doing in that life cycle. So I think that's probably a foundation from which many other things flow, because we know that from that foundation flows insight, for example. Yeah. And then with AI infused into that flows responsiveness and the ability to anticipate and be proactive, which is what we've spent
Absolutely.
a lot of time talking about today. So I think
Absolutely.
data is a foundation. I think also the foundation of workflow design, guided by great service design principles, is important. And again, I would imagine that people would want to have, let's call it at least a common approach to that workflow, whether that literally means a single tool or it is workflow that is creatively joined together through API or webhooks or whatever technology you use to glue the stuff together. Um, in order that the life cycle literally can be visible and literally can be seen and literally can be managed, because at the moment it's not. So again, workflow matters to me there. And then finally, we talked about bots, for example, and I can't believe in the future, if they're going to be persistent, that you would want to have a bot that only did sales, a bot that only did marketing, and a bot that only did service. Now, you might decide to design them in more focused ways, but the point about a single branded and capable digital assistant across the life cycle seems to be one that will be natural for customers to identify with. And we're still at the stage, by the way, can you think of a bot that you've ever returned to who goes, "Hi, Ramana, good to see you again"? We're not even at that level of relationship building with our digital assistants. It's a one-off and forget me. So we've got tons to do on that, but it makes logical sense to build the digital assistant as being as persistent across that life cycle as the way you've suggested the contact center is capable of engaging in social listening and and that early stage, and then sales and marketing, and then servicing. So I think, again, big picture, we need to have human assistance and virtual assistance being persistent across each of those key stages of the life cycle.